Welcome to Hull and Estate and Succession Planning, a series of podcasts hosted by Ian Hull and Susanna Popovic-Montag. The podcast you are listening to will provide information and insights into estate planning in Canada. From the offices of Hull & Hull in Toronto, here are Ian and Susanna.
Hi, and welcome to Hull and Estate and Succession Planning. You're listening to episode 161 of our podcast on Tuesday, April 21st, 2009.
Hi, Susanna.
Hi, Ian. How are you today?
Just great, thanks.
That's good.
Excited to be podcasting today. When I did actually manage to get away for a couple days last week and took my iPod Touch with me when I traveled and got caught up on our video, because I sometimes don't get a chance to listen to us on the video and to see how it goes, and it was kind of fun. So I was reinvigorated with some new ideas at how we should be presenting.
Right.
And one of the ideas that I thought would be useful is a big part of what we're trying to accomplish with our podcasts and video and audio blog is more of from a succession planning, estate planning perspective. We try to touch on general topic areas. So I thought what can be helpful is to know what's going on around us. We're in the social media community. We obviously want to spread our word, and they want to spread others' words. But one of the conferences that's coming up that I thought was of real interest to those who in our field is this Canadian Bar Association conference, and it's coming up. And the neat thing is it's coming up in the great town of Kingston, Ontario, which hosts the Podcasters Across Borders conference every June, which is a fantastic social media conference.
And you go to that every year, don't you?
I try to. I don't know if I'll be able to make it this year because of a family commitment, but it's a great conference on the social media side. But the organizers have put together an elder law conference, and it's I guess the title of it is the Canadian Conference on Elder Law, put on by the Canadian Bar Association. But what I thought was of interest was some of the topic areas, and it's neat to see what are these hot topics in the area of elder law and where people are sort of discussing. We have been out to the Canadian Conference on Elder Law in Vancouver for a few years now in a row. Terrific conference, and really the leading continuing legal education conference in the country. And now it's being sort of, and this isn't the first year that this group has done it, it's sort of being repeated in some ways with great speakers in the Elder Law Conference in Kingston.
And it's interesting, Ian, with these conferences, they're not just for lawyers either, and some of them are geared to have certainly a legal component to it, but there is also, the police aspect, elder abuse kinds of issues. There are medical individuals and medical professionals who come to these conferences. There's a wide cross-section of people, in addition to lawyers, who are actually taking a notice of the issues that arise in this whole area. Absolutely, and the organizers we know well is Mary Alice Thompson from Kingston and Professor David Friedman from Queen's University. The conference is theory and practice, and because the area of the elder law touches both professionals and all various schemes of professionals, the theory and practice theme is really quite interesting. And one of the first sessions that they're talking about is assessing the assessor. And we learned a lot about that now quite some time ago in the Re-Knock decision, not the Re-Koch decision, which will be in the show notes, about what the court started to expect about an assessor. But that decision is now over a decade old, and so it's a really fascinating dialogue, because the question of assessment of the capacity, the whole expectation, is so fundamental to elder law. Because as we know, a finding of incapacity must be made before we can get a guardianship appointment if you go to court to get a guardian appointed. And typically a lot of people will say they don't want their power of attorney acted on until there's a finding of incapacity. That's right. So that capacity assessor is frontline, the most important person in the food chain of unloading into this world of incapacity. And where I thought, and it happens to be the first topic of the seminar they're going to be doing down in Kingston, is this whole question of assessing that capacity assessor, and what are the pros, the cons, what should be expected, and so on. So I thought maybe we could take a couple minutes talking about what we see in our practice as important elements of a good assessment, and where we might see some problems with the assessment. And that's a great idea, and because I know on our companion podcast, Hull and Estates, some of our lawyers have spoken just recently on the issue of capacity assessments and assessors in particular. And given how important the ultimate finding by an assessor can be and how it can actually take away one's liberties, to make sure that that process is properly carried out by someone who's qualified and knows the legal requisites for a finding of a capacity, I think is just crucial. And I know you've written actually about the topic in the past, and I believe it was Hilary Laidlaw, one of our colleagues, has sort of coined a phrase where an assessor has got to probe and verify as part of their testing for capacity. Maybe we could just flesh that out a little bit.
Well, absolutely, because you see, really, like you say, it's this moment in time where you are going to eliminate freedom, essentially, to do what you want to do, that the courts are going to be very sensitive to. And so, as you say, Hilary Laidlaw has been a big proponent of this concept that you need to take 2 steps in the process. You need to ask the right questions, and then you need to verify if those answers make sense and that they are indeed true. And we've had podcasts in the past, and we've talked a lot about the recent Law Society rules about verifying clients. And it's the same thing. You identify, so you probe, you ask who is your uncle and who is your aunt, and maybe ask some questions about their abilities to cognitively follow you along. And then you follow it up with some verification. And if after your meeting you find out that she was talking about Stephen Harper's aunt and not her aunt, then the bells go off. So that's very true, and that's a good way of looking at it in terms of the analysis, is that high expectation of probe and verify in the context of the courts who are just simply not going to allow you to they're not going to allow themselves to make a finding of incapacity unless it's clear.
That's right. Because
of the human impact of that. I mean, you're handcuffing this person, and they're not easy handcuffs to get out of.
That's for sure.
And we have seen in the past where people want to get out of that, they want to set aside a finding incapacity, and in Ontario we have a whole board, the Consent and Capacity Board, where people can go to, and it's a hearing, and it's a really well done process. The hearing officers are superb, and the process is very, in a sense, user friendly. But I mean, again, once you've made that finding of capacity, it's very hard to let it go. And then, of course, if a judge makes that finding of capacity, it's even harder.
That's right.
So, one of the things I guess I would say as I was looking to assess the assessor is also look at the source. I mean, there's nothing like delegating to good, authoritative, well-versed people. And you're essentially delegating a serious part of the process, whether you're caring for your mother or father, or whether you're asking as a lawyer or whatever, who you're going to outsource that job to, you want to make sure is well qualified. And an easy starting point in Ontario anyway, which is great, is that the Ministry of the Attorney General has a list. And there's an assessor's list that we can go to. So that's a good starting point. And then we can start to look at their qualifications and not be afraid to Google and do all the sorts of things to test it, ask around. Like any professional, you're going to get involved. You're essentially going to a specialist. And if you're going to a specialist, you want to, I think anyway, to say to my clients, look, make sure we know who we're getting ourselves into.
And the reason that's so important, of course, is because the question or the whole threshold of capacity is a legal concept that has to be explained to people who aren't necessarily qualified as assessors to do the determination. And many times we'll see people go to their family doctors to get an assessment of capacity, and you want to make sure in those situations that the doctor, even though they are a long-term doctor or long-term caregiver, that they know what is actually required for that finding, because it's very specific and important.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we've assessed the assessor. We've talked about this terrific conference that's coming down to Kingston, and I guess somebody might ask, it's Friday, June 12th, 2009, and it's being put on by the Ontario Bar Association, Continuing Legal Education, in the Elder Law section. It's called Elder Law Theory and Practice. We may have some more to say about this upcoming conference because of the interesting topics that are going to be canvassed. So thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you, Susanna.
Thanks very much, Ian.
You have been listening to Hull and Estate and Succession Planning by Ian Hull and Susanna Popovic-Montag. The podcast that you've been listening to has been provided as an information service. It is a summary of current issues in estates and estate planning. It is not legal advice, and you are reminded to always speak with a legal professional regarding your specific circumstance. To listen to other Hull & Hull podcasts or leave any questions or comments, please visit our website at hullestatemediation.com.